What's going on, everybody? You're watching The Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. The Black Godfather on Netflix. You got to check it out. Guy who made it, Reggie Hudlin. What's up, man?
Great, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
So this was a really interesting watch because I never heard of Clarence Avant, and this opened me up to a whole new world. You obviously had some exposure to him, so what was it like putting this whole thing together?
It was a joy because I've known him most of my professional career, and in certain circles, he's legendary.
Yeah.
And a lot of people see the movie and they're like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed I didn't know who he was." He didn't want you to know who he was.
Right.
And it took us like 20 plus years to convince him to make the movie. But now that it is, everyone's like, "Oh my God, this changes everything." So it was just great to tell the story. And even, the team who thought we knew the story, every time we interview somebody, they'd be like, "You know who you need to talk to?" And be like, "Who? What? How did they connect to Clarence?" And it just got bigger and bigger.
So how did you guys finally convince him?
It was actually his daughter, Nicole, who's a producer on the film. And we kept trying to get him to do a book. And finally she said, maybe books aren't your medium. Maybe a documentary. He goes, "Oh, okay, we'll think about that. And who do you want to do the doc?" And he goes, "I like Reggie. Call Reggie." I was like, "Whoa. Papal order."
Like that's some high praise right
We're in from the Vatican. Let's go. Let's make it. So super excited.
So when did you guys first meet?
I met at the beginning of my movie career. I had done a little short film in college, but this film producer who Clarence was mentoring was a few years ahead of me. And he said, "Hey, this movie we're trying to do with Janet Jackson at the time, I know this kid who might be cool." So they flew me out. I met Clarence. He was, of course, amazing. He lived up to the reputation I had heard from all my music business friends, from Andre Harrell, Russell Simmons, and they're like, "This guy," and I was like, "Wow, he's like Zeus. He's so powerful." But when you meet him, he's so down to earth and and raw and regular. So you're like, "This is amazing." And I was at his house, which had the most amazing art collection in the world, and you're just like, "Right, got it. Don't touch anything." Just.
Yeah, this dude is just a king in terms of bringing people together.
Yes.
And you're living proof of what everybody was talking about in the film, about him placing you somewhere and piecing you together with some other people. Like, that's how your career virtually got going with certain things.
Yeah, exactly. Because, the reason why there was going to be a Janet Jackson Time movie is because Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, produced both. Right? So they're like, "Hey, here's this piece." So now, when I'm, now I feel so like, God, Jimmy and Terry are like my friends now. Like, I can just call them.
Not too bad, right?
Right? And so you just go, these are amazing worlds that, all get connected through Clarence.
So we were talking off camera, really hot time for documentaries, but documentaries are a labor of love. It can be tough to have the financing. What were some of the struggles and challenges here?
Well, we were very lucky in that Netflix was a really amazing partner, and they were like all in on making sure the doc was awesome. We just had unreasonably modest goals at the beginning.
Which were what?
Well, we'll interview 30 people. We can get this thing done in a year. Cut to 75 interviews over the course of 3 years, right? But we just couldn't help it because the story just kept unfolding. And I made a promise to Nicole, "Look, I'm going to keep shooting until we're done."
Right.
Whatever done means. It was clear like we're insisting Chapo territory. We're just going to keep painting.
Just keep it going, yeah.
Right, and I actually made 2 other movies while making this movie. Yeah.
Wow, how'd you pull that off?
Just forego sleep. That's the key. But yeah, you just work and work and work. But it was completely worth it. This is a movie. I've had a lot of success in my career. I've been very fortunate. House Party and Boomerang and producing Django, all this stuff. This movie, I think we're at like 100% Rotten Tomatoes. I keep looking for someone who doesn't like. I keep looking on the internet, where hate goes to live, right?
Of course, yeah. You want to see. You're curious.
I'm scrolling down the comments, nothing but love, and that's the power of Clarence. Because Clarence, even though he's the tough guy, he's ultimately all about love, and that's really connecting with audiences.
So you mentioned how some people were telling stories about Clarence State you didn't know, other people didn't know. What surprised you the most, or what did you learn about him that really kind of blew your mind?
Well, me and the production team, it was Nelson George, who's a very well-known pop culture journalist, Byron Phillips, who got his start in the music business and had, Clarence had negotiated a lot of his deals.
Right.
So we all felt like, well, we know Clarence, we know his story. But we realized we were all, the guys are like, okay, I felt the tail of the elephant, I felt the trunk, I felt the leg. None of us knew the big picture of it, right? So you talk with Andy Young, right, who's a legendary guy from Martin Luther King to Mayor of Atlanta, UN ambassador. And he talks about how Clarence just cold called him, right? And Andy answered the phone, right? There's no layers, right?
No,
just right
to him.
Right. And he goes, hey, you running for Congress? And he goes, yeah. In Georgia? Yeah. You crazy? Maybe. Well, I'm crazy enough to back you. And then, just say, I'm going to throw a big concert. What do you mean? I can't afford that. Did I tell you?
I'm going to get it done.
Did I say you needed the money? You just run. And hung up the phone, right? He goes, okay, a crazy guy just called me. And then there's billboards all over Atlanta for this big fundraising concert, and 30,000 people show up. And that launches Andy Young's career. And you just go, what? What?
How did this just happen?
Right.
Well, he was supremely confident, and obviously he had built out the career, but where do you think that all originated from with him?
I think he was a guy who, he was a do something about a guy. I mean, that story about his childhood, crushing poverty, his parents are, when you're a sharecropper, you're not a slave, but you're like a half a beat from slavery. And then on top of it, he had this horrific stepfather who was, beating his mother. And at 13, he was like, I've had it. And he put rat poison in his stepfather's food. And, his little brother told the stepfather, I wouldn't eat that. But, I mean, that took a lot of courage on a lot of levels.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that's a stand-up guy who will do whatever it takes to fight for what's right, right? And, look, he got him thrown out of the house. So suddenly, at a youth, he's on a train for the first time in his life, going north to New Jersey. But that opened up his whole life. And then he met Joe Glazier, who owned one of the biggest booking agencies in America, who saw Clarence and said, "You've got what it takes." And he kind of saw a kindred spirit and said, "You know what? I'm going to give you the code to how life works. And whether it's entertainment, whether it's politics, whatever, this is how you get things done." And Clarence was able to keep evolving, no matter what room he was in, but keep his value system, which is pretty rare.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I want to run through some people that we saw in the documentary.
Yes.
Let's start with Quincy Jones, because that bond is really special. For somebody that hasn't been around those two guys, how would you describe that friendship?
Best friends, 50-year best friends, right? So when that thing of like, two of them in the 1950s, right? They meet each other. There's no one else like the two of them, right? So they go, oh, it's just you and me, right? And yes, there'll be more people to come perhaps in the future, but right now it's just the two of us who are just people who are just breaking down these barriers, who come from the same kind of tragic circumstances.
Right.
And they clicked and they stayed tight from decade to decade to decade. And they're perfect, because one's Mr. Outside, Quincy, worldwide known, popular, beloved, Clarence, Mr. Inside, right?
It's an interesting pairing,
Yeah, so like the yin and yang, but you can't separate them, and they love each other to death.
How about Jim Brown? I thought those stories were pretty interesting.
With Jim Brown, been the man, right?
Yeah.
As a football player, I mean, him and Dirty Dozen.
He's done the thing, yeah.
Him and Ice Station Zero.
Yep.
I say anyway, so Ice Station Zebra. So I mean, he's been in all these classics, all these different things. So when we finally got to meet Jim Brown in person, right? So we're waiting, and I hear this doom, doom down the hallway, and he walks in, and he's older, right? He doesn't have a hair, big gray beard, but he gets these giant hands, right?
Just mitts, yeah.
And you just go, I never want to be hit with those hands. I don't care how old he is. I don't want to feel those bricks against my face ever.
Well, those were great stories. Clarence is like, you're going to sign the contract, you're going to do the film, just in terms of Jim's career with what he was doing.
Jim just like, okay, I'm literally unstoppable, right? And I'm not playing by any rules. And then he meets his match with Clarence. Another, like, who are you? You don't seem to play by the rules. I don't even get what you are. But again, kindred spirit.
Right.
And then boom, they make magic happen.
Well, speaking of kindred spirits, it seemed like Muhammad Ali and Clarence were quite a duo. I mean, if Muhammad was still alive, that would have been somebody to really pick his brain about Clarence.
Oh my God. I mean, it hurts me so much that we did not get a chance to talk with Muhammad Ali, because clearly, you know, they not only, you know, did projects together, but they stayed friends.
Yeah.
And again, it makes perfect sense. Iconoclast. I mean, what's the pattern on all these people? These are people who go, I don't care. I'm doing it my way. And that's the Clarence way.
There's a lot of just holy crap moments in this whole story. One in particular was Bill Clinton talking about his Monica Lewinsky scandal and that Clarence called him. What was it like getting that out of Clinton and hearing that story that Clarence said, hey, just keep doing your thing, keep working, nobody's going to take you away from the presidency?
Well, it was mind-blowing to me, because first of all, I'm interviewing presidents, right? Which is like, that seems
you got President Obama, President Clinton, like, what? You're probably like, what's going on
What's
here?
going on? Is that, do I have a new job now? You know? So, and I had met President Obama many times, but I had never met Bill Clinton. And I was very excited to see, because of course he has an amazing reputation as a super charismatic guy.
Right.
So we're talking, and I'm like, yes, he is that guy. He's so smart. And at the same time can break things down to really simple, accessible phrases. So I'm just impressed by him as a man and as a thinker. And his honesty is incredible. So when I asked him the question, well, what's the best piece of advice Clarence ever gave you? And he gets quiet.
Yeah.
He looks down, and he starts telling that story. And I can see the raw emotion in his eyes. And I'm like, wait, he's never talked about this ever that I'd known of. And it's so honest and real. And I was so moved because it was clear the closeness he had with Clarence. It was clear how grateful he was that at a time of being besieged, this guy gave the most simple but most crucial advice, which is they only win if you give up,
right? And
just go to work every day and just don't let it stop you. Just keep going. I mean, that was profound.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it was one of the craziest moments throughout the whole story.
Yeah. So I was just very grateful that, you know, Mr. Clinton was that honest and shared something that clearly still has to cause him tremendous pain, but really illuminated the depth of his relationship with Clarence.
No question about it. So Clarence always had an eye for talent, and whether it was entertainment, music, it went to politics as well. And here's young Barack Obama before he's even a senator, and Clarence is already on him. So how did that relationship develop over the years?
Well, it's funny because, you know, me and a bunch of my friends did a fundraiser for Barack Obama when he was a senator.
Right.
And when we were talking, I realized, oh, we did that because Clarence told my friends to do it, and then they called me. And I'm like, wow, Clarence is telling me what to do, and he didn't even tell me what to do. You know, so, I mean, but that's exactly right. Clarence is a guy who goes, this guy, you know, he has what it takes. I'm going to, you know, place an early bet on him. And like that early money, that's like yeast, right?
Yeah, it hasn't started to rise yet.
Yeah, but it has a huge multiplier effect, right? It's a boom. So the fact that, you know, he had that level of support for a national fundraiser to identify him that early, to put money in, you know, to get us all to put money in, that helped, you know, position Barack to be the kingmaker and eventually king that he was, that he could go around campaign for other people and then, you know, be the president.
Yeah, even going back and seeing that 2004 Boston speech and thinking where it all started really in a big way.
Yeah, and you know, that speech was a real goosebump speech. And you go, well, still goosebumps.
All these years later, yeah.
Yeah, you go, who's topping that speech?
And honestly, those words are even more profound today, given where we're at as a country, right?
Yeah, you just go, what? We just need the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
We need to call Mr. Peabody. Like, we need
Seriously.
that. Yeah.
Have you played hoops with President Obama before?
I have not played hoops with President Obama because people who do, like, first of all, he's good, so he beats people.
Right.
And then people who try to play rough. And then, it's like, hey, are you really going to play rough with Obama? Are you really, there's a secret security guys over there. I mean, my son's 11, but I would throw him in just to see what would happen, because my son's kind of nice. So, I would.
You throw a few elbows, maybe?
I would just test it with my son, because, like, he's used to playing bigger guys like me, and, he's like, Dad, you ain't nothing. I'm like, fine. The president's going to be my proxy.
I feel you. Well, let's talk about your career. You mentioned House Party before.
Yeah.
How did that movie cut through for you?
Well, it was crazy because at the time, hip-hop was exploding.
Yeah.
Right? And it really clearly needed a cinematic equivalent to what was happening musically. And those first hip-hop movies, a lot of them were very exploitive, kind of canon films, breaking and rapping, and they really weren't true to the culture. And I remember my senior year in college, and Rum DNC hit with It's Like That, and Sucker MCs, we were like, whoa!
This is revolutionary.
Ripped my head off. And actually, I remember at the exact same time, New Edition was breaking. Right, so I was there, in college in Boston. So I remember calling Streetwise, the record label, like, "Hey, I'm a guy making a student film, and I'd love to have a New Edition in it." No one called me back, of course, but it was just the idea of like, there's this exciting new thing musically, and like, how do we put it on film?
How do we harness that? Yeah.
Right. So, and so when we made House, I remember being at a party at Nelson George's house, and Spike Lee was there, and Russell Simmons was there, and then Russell was getting ready to make Tougher Than Leather.
Oh, wow.
And me pitching Russell, and he's like, some kid from Harvard wants to make a hip-hop movie, get out of here. And, so then ultimately getting House Party made, and, I think House Party resonated because it was just about regular kids making hip-hop. Because it's like, no, hip-hop isn't necessarily a thing. Yes, there's the showbiz part of it, but then there's the folk art part of it, of like, this is something that we do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think the grounded nature of it resonated and continues to resonate.
What's the deal with the House Party reboot? With LeBron's team, any news on that?
I keep hering it's going to happen.
Have you been consulted?
I have not been consulted.
Well, you'd think you'd be a good guy to talk to, right?
I would think. Particularly since, because there's been a lot of sequels, right? And they all have been successful enough to make another one, but none of them have made as much as the original. And it's funny because when I made the movie, I had some really specific rules about what to do and what not to do. And the studio was like, we don't need you, Reggie. And I was like, I think you should.
You probably listen. Yeah.
Right, and like, they keep not succeeding because they don't know the rules, right? And so I'm like, okay. So we'll see.
We got to know the rules.
Got to know the rules.
What are the rules?
There's a lot of rules.
There's a lot of rules?
There's a lot of rules. And a lot of rules that seem chronological, right? And look, I know they've got some smart people to work on it, so it could be awesome.
Sure.
I have no idea.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, how about Django? When I watched that movie, it messed me up. It was just such a powerful film. How'd you get involved with that, and what did you think of the final product?
Well, it was crazy. It happened several years, like a long time before the film got made. Quentin and I were friends, and we would just love to talk movies, right? And we would, like guys would go, yeah, Reggie, we were following you and Quentin, then you went to some weird place and no one knew what either of you were talking about.
What is that weird place? What does that look like?
It gets into a level of film obscurity in terms of reference.
I gotcha.
And everyone's just like, okay, now
you've lost us.
No one knows.
You're talking about a film from like the 50s.
Right,
I've never seen.
Something that showed in some drive-in in 72 for a week, So anyway, so he and I got into this conversation about movies about slavery and how I thought they all failed.
Yeah.
And for me, there was only one great movie about slavery, Spartacus, right? And until someone made a movie on that level about the American experience, I wasn't interested. And that kind of intrigued him. I also reference a classic by Fred Williamson called The Legend of Nigger Charlie, which I saw as a kid, which I don't remember a frame of, but I remember how I felt. Because Fred Williamson, a.k.a. The Hammer, whooped ass from beginning to end. And I'm like, well, I need to see that in a movie. So Quentin was like, I hear you. So, so then he calls me, I don't know, years later. He's like, hey, man, I got a new script. Why don't you come by the house? I'm having a little party. I'm like, great. So we come by, and he hands me this phone book. And he goes, here it is. You plant the seed. This is the tree. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he reminds me of that conversation we had all those years ago. So he wanted me to read it. I said, thank you. I read it, and I'm like, oh, my God, this is awesome. I can't wait to see this. I'm so happy you're going back to work. He goes, yeah, but you like it? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you have some notes? Well, yeah. Now we talk through the notes, and he goes, oh, those are good ideas. I'm like, oh, man, thank you. Just let me know when it's coming out. He said, oh, no, you're working on the movie. Huh? Yeah. No, everyone knows. Like,
this news to me, right?
I just needed to know if you liked it, right? If you're in. So the following week, we were pitching the studios, and a week after that, we were location scouting.
Wow.
So it was like, boom, it's on.
I mean, that was a wild movie.
Yeah,
Incredible.
I mean, well, you know, Quentin is a genius. I mean, flat out. I mean, he's really the only person I've ever met who's as good a writer as a director, as good a director as he is a writer. And most people aren't ambidextrous like that.
No, they're not mutually exclusive like that.
Right, I mean, there are directors who write or whatever, but like he's a beast. And I really can't wait for people to see his new movie. You know, he's one of the great filmmakers of our time.
Who are the people you put in your pantheon as the greatest filmmakers in your opinion?
Oh, man. Well, it goes back again. I'm going to start.
Right. Give me a couple.
I mean, look. You know, Kurosawa is just unbelievable, and you know, obviously, and those who love Kurosawa. You know, people like Steven Spielberg, right? And it's funny because I feel like we take Spielberg for granted, and it's just unfair.
Right. It's like, oh, he's done all these great movies.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Right.
And also because you know he pleases people.
Sure.
And I think there's an American attitude that says if you're funny, if you make us feel good, then that's easy than feeling bad.
Right.
And it's just like this weird Puritan thing that says, you know, pleasure is lesser than. It's like, no, it's not.
No,
you know,
it's still a difficult thing to pull off.
It's super difficult.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, like George Lucas had this famous quote. It's like, you know, drama is easy, you know, just strangle a cat. And it's just so easy. And it's kind of true. Like, you know, making people laugh, you can't fake that. Like, either the audiences respond or not. And maintaining that for, you know, 2 hours is really hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and it's funny because now with my kids, I'm trying to show them the classics.
Yeah, so like what have you exposed them to?
Well, I just showed my son The Godfather.
Oh yeah, what do you think?
And he was all in.
That's
and
good.
I'm like, yes, these are the classics.
You get it.
This is methods for living.
Yeah, because some of these movies, they're longer, they're a little bit slower, and the younger generation isn't going to appreciate it in the same way when it first came out.
Yeah, but you know, my son is funny because, like, we're big superhero fans. We go see other superhero movies. And, like, he's gotten tough. He's gotten very selective about which superhero movies he's co-signing or not.
There you go.
So I'm like, okay. So then over the holidays, we're watching Roma.
Okay,
Which is, you know, and he wanders in, and I'm like, black and white, foreign film, subtitles, slow.
Yeah.
This is not for him. So he settles in, he's watching it with me. I'm like, okay. Then he goes, oh, would you pause it? I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm like, pause it? Like, you're caught up? Okay. So he does that, he comes back, we're watching some more, and he goes, you know, this is black and white, but I can see all the colors.
Wow. That's a profound statement.
Yo!
For what, 11 you said?
Yes!
That's insane.
He came really hard. I call the people at Netflix. I'm like, put this on the poster. Take the critics off.
They're like, what's your son's name? We'll put it on right now.
Yes, this is the line.
Wow. I'm sure as a dad that made you proud.
That made me very proud. I said, wait, hey, do you want to do what Daddy does? Do you want to make movies? So, okay, you could.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So bring it back full circle, thinking about Clarence here. What do you think his greatest impact has been?
Well, it's really hard to measure. When we were doing the film, we were trying to figure out how much wealth has he generated.
I can't even, how'd you guys even try and quantify that?
We couldn't. We hit a wall so quick because we're like, okay, wait a minute. I mean, the success of Quincy Jones, who we managed, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, L.A. and Babyface. Wait, you know, Andy Young built the the airport at Atlanta. I mean, you just go, wait a minute, you can't literally quantify, you know, the wealth he's generated in the world. But I gotta tell you, what's been so wonderful is so many people are loving the movie and they're like, wow, you know what, after seeing that movie, I want to go back to work. I need to give more to people.
Sure.
So this may be his last greatest gift, because if he inspires another generation to follow his path, that will be incredible.
No question about it. Reggie, it's been a pleasure, man.
Same.
Thank you very much. Black Godfather, check it out on Netflix now. You won't be disappointed. We'll see you next time. Sit down.